All right, so now we are recording, and so today's whole session will be recorded and posted onto our website. If you have not seen that before, I'll just show out on our website, gdmdata.com. We have a section under the resources heading devoted to our webinars, and we'll post upcoming ones that we have scheduled, and at the bottom there will be the archive. And so all of the recordings we've done for webinars before, you'll find here. And this is kind of the third part of our year-end review, if you will. And so you'll find the link later on today. We'll post the recording for today's session, and here you can see the other ones in this little series. And so, as I mentioned, this is this kind of third part of our year-end review. Really, the idea being, in a lot of places, the research season from 2020 is kind of winded down. You might still have a few things on your to-do list, but by and large, the real busy season has passed. And very often, that's when ARM gets shut down and kind of left in the dust a little bit. And so we just kind of want to present some ideas and some things you can do kind of while things are still fresh from the last season, to prepare yourself for next season, maybe even make next season even better, more efficient, more powerful, kind of utilizing some of the tools in ARM. And thinking right now, really leveraging some of the experiences while things are fresh, but now you maybe have a little bit of time to implement something, do something a little better here for next year. And so today's topic is kind of focusing on the data, specifically the description of your data. And so that's kind of the tagline here about improving the assessments next year by utilizing these standard evaluations. So real quick, if you have not encountered this tool before, a standard evaluation, we typically just call them SEs for short. Really, it is an encapsulation of your assessment header. So when you go to perform a rating, of course, you have your data, and you also have the description of what it was you did. And so that's kind of the top half of that two-part table in ARM. Here, just real quickly in a trial, you have the data. We usually refer to this section where you've described the data. We call that the header. And so really, we're focusing in on that header, the way that you described the assessment you performed. And so we're going to save and reuse portions of that header. And that really is what an SE is. And so today, kind of like the last session, if you joined us for the study rules last week, it's kind of one part training, one part sales pitch. So if it sounds a little bit like a used car salesman, I'll apologize ahead of time, but a little bit of a sales pitch for utilizing this tool. You'll see throughout the day, but really here, I kind of want to underscore why this feature can be useful, what it would be used for, and if it would fit your use case. And so really, I kind of categorized, much like we did with the study rules, kind of categorized maybe the uses of this tool into maybe two different general types of ARM users, and most likely you fit somewhere in between them, perhaps. But really looking at research that you have a protocol writer is what I called it here. You really would have a sponsor company that's planning out the research. And so you would have somebody that writes up the protocol. What are we going to do in this experiment? How many trials are we going to perform? What's the design, et cetera, et cetera. And so there's kind of that perspective of the person setting up the trial, and then they'll send out those trials. And once the trials have been performed, we'll receive the data back. And then maybe there's the data combination that will happen after the fact. And then on the flip side, it's kind of whoever that protocol gets sent to is the trialist. And that's my other grouping here. That might be just somebody else in the same company. that might be a totally separate company, a CRO that would have that research contracted out to them. Or it could be the very same person as the protocol writer, if you're doing all of your research from beginning to end. And so kind of try to group those into two general categories, just because some of the needs and the uses of features in ARM, I think it's easy to kind of categorize those two. So I'll just kind of refer to them, either the sponsor or the protocol writer. Those terms I might use interchangeably, and then the trialist is pretty cut and dried. I usually stick to that term. So looking at these two perspectives, that protocol writer, as you're planning things out, really an SE is really valuable to standardize your data across different trialists that might be performing your research, or even just within your same company, as you have other people in your company that would also be doing research, and being able to all describe your data the same is really important. And really it's chiefly most important for that multi-trial analysis. So, when you're trying to bring together several trials worth of data, one of the advantages just in general of ARM is its structure. So that way everyone is kind of doing things consistently. If you sent out to 3 different people and told them to run this experiment and send me back what information you gathered in Excel, it would be a total mess to try to combine those. You'll know for a fact that you'll end up with 3 totally different looking spreadsheets with different flow and different organization. So really having that standardization, you get that a little bit with ARM just by default with the way ARM is structured. This is kind of taking it one step further, and maybe the content that's being put into that structure now can be the same, and that makes it so much easier to combine data later. If you've ever used the ST, the summary across trials add-in, pretty much as soon as we get through any training on that, it becomes very clear. You can kind of see it in people's eyes when we start talking about SEs. Then it's like, oh yeah, that would make things so much easier to combine the data if everything was put in the same. So that's really the target here. On the trialist side, maybe you're not so much focused on the multi-trial analysis because you're just kind of doing this one and you'll send it back, but this can still be a good tool for automation. Really, it'll save you time. Instead of having to fill in your column each time, you can kind of automate that, and the SE will fill in multiple pieces of information all at once. So it can be a time saver, and just looking at your trials, kind of your output that you have, those ARM trials will be more consistent, and that can be more valuable. If you, especially, being like a contract researcher where that's really what you're selling, it can really provide more, valuable trial in the end, having consistent data. So that's my main sales pitch, I guess, of why to use it. And hopefully that kind of structures when we're actually showing how to use it. Well, how will I really use it later on? That's really the map here, if you will, of where we're going. And so we'll dive in here in a moment to actually creating an SE in ARM, but essentially what we're doing and really the components of it, and we'll see ARM asks each of these steps as we go through. Really, you're going to choose one or more data columns that we're gonna look at. So it works good to have a trial open where you've got some data, or at least the headers filled in, and we're going to choose one or more data columns with that description present. Then the next step is, all right, which rows from that column or columns that we chose, which pieces of information do you want to save in the separate file? So, logically, you wouldn't ever really save a rating date in an SE, because the next time you perform that assessment, it's going to be a different date than the last time you did it. So you wouldn't ever, include that type of information in the in the file in that SE, but the way you describe what you did would be important. So you kind of have a choice there, and we'll kind of talk through how to decide which rows to include. And then finally, the last component that can come with there in an SE would be study rules. And so those will come by default if you have some rules that are defined within those columns. If you're the protocol writer, you have some options as far as whether those rules come with or not. But by and large, it's just kind of a nice way to roll in and include even more functionality here with an SE by also bringing in the rules. All right, so we'll just kind of walk through the steps of creating an SE. And so here I have a trial opened up. This is actually an example fungicide trial that is found in the tutorial study list. So if you ever want to step through this very same process, you'll find that in the tutorial study list. And so what we have here, if we just kind of look at the assessment data columns, there's a phytotoxicity rating, a vigor, then some pest severity that gets performed, and then there's a calculation of the percent of check based on that column. And we'll kind of use some of these to create our SEs. So we'll start with the most basic. I'm just going to right-click really anywhere in the grid. I'm going to choose, I do want to export this column number 1, so I'll right-click on column number 1, and there is an option to export an SE. So that will start this wizard here. First question is, what column numbers do you want to bring? And so here you can choose different columns. You can also hand type, if you only want, if you want the range of columns. I'm only going to choose column number 1 as to which columns to bring along into this SE. Then the next step here is the rows of the header. So what pieces of information from column 1 do we want to bring with? And I'm just going to press clear here. Aram remembered kind of the last selection I made when I created an SE. I'm just going to clear this out and kind of start from scratch. And so then the view here that we see, Aram kind of hides some of the fields that you wouldn't really consider including. Like I mentioned, the rating dates. You wouldn't really include the date. You wouldn't really want intervals, things like that would be very specific to that particular rating. It really don't make for very good values in your SE, because then you'll always have to delete out that value and put in the new one. So here we're left with the crop information, our part rated, rating type, rating unit, subsamples, and rating timing. So it's hiding everything else, whether it's blank or it's one of those date or interval fields that really wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. So just kind of talking through, how do you choose? I mean, this is really the meat of the SE and how you would build it. What do I want to bring with and what don't I? It can kind of be a strategy depending on how you want to approach, which E's you create. But here, looking at the first set of information, it's all kind of related to the crop. And so that one I really would consider, is this rating, or maybe this SE I want to create, is this really specific to the crop I've chosen? So in this case, we're doing phytotoxicity, and this study happens to be on winter wheat. Now, do I only do phytotoxicity on wheat? If that's the case, then yeah, bring in all of the crop information and let's bring that with. Or maybe the only research I do is on wheat, so I'm always choosing wheat. This would be another way to save time. Instead of having to always fill that in, it'll be included in my SE. So that would be kind of the reason to bring that with. I'm guessing probably more often you would say, no, I really don't want my SE to be crop specific, because I can use this then in any of my studies, and I'll just fill in after loading the SE, I'll pick which crop that particular study is for. So again, kind of a strategy idea too. You can create SE specific to the crop, and then maybe if I only work with 3 different crops, I can just kind of duplicate that set on the other crop. So here in South Dakota, it's either soybeans or corn is about all that gets grown around here. So if I was doing research around here, maybe I would just create 2 different sets of SEs, and so I would just have the 2 different sets and include all of the crop information for each of them. But if you're a little more varied, it might be smart to leave it out. So in this case, today I'll leave it out. I'll say really, phytotoxicity, that's really not linked too much to the specific crop, so we'll keep it general. Now the part rated, the rating type, and the rating unit, I think those are probably slam dunks. Those are really the core of an assessment header. What was it you did? What part were you rating, and what's the unit of measurement? I mean, those really you can't get too far describing what you did without using those fields. So those are really the meat, I think, of an SE and describing an assessment in general. So then kind of the other ones, again, kind of the same question, is just, is the value here something I'm always going to use? So like number of subsamples, yeah, if the phytotoxicity rating is I'm only ever going to do 1, then yeah, I'll bring in number of subsamples. I'm never going to do subsampling for the PhyGen here. So I'll bring in a 1, so that gets filled in each time. As opposed to the rating timing here, that's maybe kind of arbitrary or a little bit depending on that particular study as to, this happened to be the fourth time I went out to perform an assessment or more than one rating, really isn't specific to any time I do a PhyGen, probably not necessarily going to be the 4th one. So I'll leave that one out. And we'll do another example to kind of work through that process again, but that's really kind of just a thought process as you go through. Is this something that I used? Is it something that would always be that value? Oh, and I've got an error related to my view. Okay, hopefully I don't think that's related to creating the SE, so I think we're okay here. And so the other component I mentioned in this slide was study rules, but I don't have any in this study. So we didn't see any messaging about that. The next example, maybe we'll sneak in a couple of study rules just so we can see that part. But the bare minimum here is which columns and which rows. And now we're prompted to save this SE file. And so kind of like what we did last time with the study rule set, if you've seen report sets before, things like that, we're really saving to this magical location here on your computer where ARM goes to look for all of these types of files and customization things that you're building specific to you is in this GDM-def folder. And so we can give this SE file a name, and really you want to be, descriptive as to what is the target, what does this SE do, or when would I use it? And so in this case, this, we're doing maybe this is our phytotoxicity for a crop, and I think maybe general in case I do some specific phytotoxicity types. The rating type was that PhyGen, the general phytotoxicity. So we'll just remind ourselves that that's what we're doing here. So it's good to be descriptive to remind yourself to know kind of when to use it. There is also a description line here, so you have a few more characters to go with here. We'll also see this later on when we utilize this SE. Both the name that we chose and this description that we enter, those are saved and referenced again when you load in an SE. So each time we use this SE file that we're creating, then the name of it and the description gets recorded in the trial. Kind of helpful for identification that that's kind of where that came from. Also can be useful in ST to summarize. So here I'm just going to, maybe I can use a few more characters if I want. You know, phytotoxicity on crop. Maybe I should quantify that with general phytotoxicity, you know, whatever we want to enter here. And so then we kind of get that confirmation that here that file gets created. And so again, we've generated this SE file. It really is just living on your computer. It actually can be really easy to share with others as well, because it is just a little binary file living on your computer. All right, so let's create one more SE. Kind of work through this process again. This time we'll do a multi-column. So let's take this pest severity. It looks like we're going to do it 10 different times. So we're going to sample 10 different leaves. And then once we get all of those values, then we're going to do a calculation, do an Abbott's calculation on that base data here. So this is an Abbott % of untreated. So the check treatment will be set to 0%, and then we'll see how each treatment performed relative to that. So again, right-click and start by exporting the SE. And we get to choose which columns. I right-clicked in column number 4, so that's where we started. But I can click 3 and 4. Now again, which line numbers are we included here? Again, you can see my previous selection, but let's just clear and kind of talk through this process once more. And so now we have the pest as well as the crop here listed. Really, it's the same thought process as the crop. Are we trying to lock ourselves down here to a specific, disease in this case? Probably not. I think we do a pest severity regardless of what specific disease we're looking at, and regardless of what crop. So I won't select either of those sets, but certainly if we wanted to, you could include, all 4 of them all at once, or maybe since we are doing, a pest severity, maybe that's really specific just to the disease. I always am working in the disease. Maybe I'll include just the pest type of disease. Save me a little time having to choose disease, but I won't bring across the pest code because then I can pick which code I'm using in that particular study. So maybe we'll do that. We'll ignore the crop. And again, that part rated, rating type, rating unit, those are definitely ones we'd want to include. Since these are subsamples, we could consider whether we'd want to bring that sample size and number of subsamples across. I guess it would depend in this case with my pest severity. Am I always taking 10 samples, or does it kind of depend on the crop? Does it depend on the type of research, how many samples I would take? So that's really the question is it always going to be 10? If so, then let's bring them in. If not, let's leave them out, and I can always fill in when I utilize the SE. I can fill in the true sample size of what I'm doing in that particular case. So maybe I'll leave that one out for an example here. Crop stage information, that's probably not too applicable for the next time, because that's really documenting that particular at that particular time of assessment, what was the crop stage. So we definitely don't want to fill that in each time with that information. Same thing with the density, rating timing. We did that last time. That's probably not the first time we're going to fill it in. But the ARM action codes, that would be important because we have a calculation. So here we're choosing the Abbott's calculation, and so we would really want to bring that with. And now one thing to note, we are referencing column number 3, but ARM will be smart enough to really know what that's referring to. When we load this again, we're not going to necessarily automatically calculate from column 3 when we use this SE again. It'll know kind of relative to each other what to bring across, as long as we do bring in that original column 2. So what I mean by that is if we had chosen just column number 4, then that calculation might not really work because ARM isn't going to know what are we referring to. So then you just kind of have this single SE that has that calculation, but what column are you talking about? And so bringing in both of them, the raw data and the calculate column, then ARM will make sure that those are a pair and will be calculated as we use them again, which we will see here in a little bit when we load this SE again. And number of decimals, maybe I always like to have 2 decimals with, and I can always change that value if I want something different. So, and now once again, let's give this a name. Maybe it's a disease severity. We're doing the percent in case maybe I have other ratings or scales, and a percent a check, or maybe an Abbott. Just depending on how you want to describe it, just use something that it's clear to you, and then you'll know kind of when to choose it when you're loading, what exactly it is. And then we can, again, be a little more verbose. Disease severity and Abbott's calculation. And so now we've generated that SE. All right, so now the fun part is let's use that SE. So if I just go to the end here, so we've got all of our data columns. Let's just go to the end and say, well, we're in the middle of this research season, and I want to, we have a few more columns here. Let me just remove those. I don't think I need all these extra ones. I must have been playing with something. I don't think those are usually included here. Let's delete those data columns and just delete that whole group. All right, there we go. So we have data. Our last column has data. Now we're in a totally empty column. Maybe we're mid-season. We're still going to perform some more assessments. In this case, let's go out and take another phytotoxicity rating. Here's where we can then utilize that SE. I'm just going to right-click and insert an SE from file. So now note 13 was our last data column and 14 was totally empty. And let's just grab that phytotoxicity SE that we just created. So now what happens is in column number 14, just the rows of information that we chose are copied in here now from that SE. So you'll notice I don't have my crop selected because we did not include that in the SE. But I do have my part rated, the rating type, the rating unit, and the number of subsamples. 2 more pieces of information that you'll notice hidden by default at the moment, but the SE name and the SE description. Those fields are usually hidden by default, but do get filled in with information here when you load an SE. You can see now that name that we gave the file, that is the SE name. And then the SE description here was that longer description that we filled in for that second prompt when we were saving the file. So that's a nice way to see that that's kind of where this column came from, how you defined it, and it's a great trigger to know that this was my consistent, as long as I don't change any of my information that was copied in, we know it'll be the same each time that we load it. So now here we could fill in the crop that we are looking at. I'll just grab corn, even though obviously this is the same study with the winter wheat, so it's unlikely I'm doing both of them, but you can fill in the crop that you have in the study, since it wasn't included in that SE, what other details that you have, today's date, and you can put in your values, whatever you will do. And it's that quick. So again, kind of a time saver, but really the big thing here is that consistency as well, that you'll always do it. So the next time, whether it's in a different study or the same study, you're doing a crop phytotoxicity, you just insert SE and you bring in that file. And you know that that core way that you describe the assessment is going to be the same each and every time. Now let's see that second SE we created, column number 16. Let's insert from file, and we'll bring in that disease severity. So what we have here now, you'll notice we did bring in that pest type of disease, but we did not bring the specific pest because we didn't choose it. So kind of nice. We saved ourselves maybe a little bit of time instead of having to choose disease before we get to see our personal list. My personal list is pretty short, but we'll just take the one that's in there, and then I can select the one. Same thing for the crop. I could fill in the crop now. But again, the key parts that we want to bring with us are copied in directly, and it's going to be entered in the same way. We have both data columns that we had chosen. So if we scroll down here, oh, that did not come in correctly, did it? Let me check my view options here. It's almost like I have a sort or something that it changed the order. It doesn't have that, but it seemed to bring it in the wrong order. Let's run that one more time here. We did have that error message when we were trying to create that one. Let's just really quickly recreate it. This is jumping ahead a little bit in my slides. I was going to show a way to, you can always update your SEs. So if you create one and then when you start to implement it, you realize, oh shoot, I should have included more information, or you know what, this has been a pain because now I have to reselect my disease each time. You can always re-save the SE over top. So let's do that now here. If I export the SE, I'll go real quick, kind of doing that same process we did before, 3 and 4. And then the pieces of information we want to bring with, nice that it remembered it. I'll just choose those very same ones again. So now the trick is, instead of giving this a totally brand new name, I'm just going to select the very same name again, and this will overwrite the file. And so ARM is making sure we realize what we are doing, and yes, we are going to overwrite this. You just want to, take care when you're doing this. If you've used this SE many times before, now suddenly you're changing the way it's filled in. You just have to be a little bit careful with that. And what did we say? This was just our, I'll be really brief here, just disease severity. All right, let's give this a try now. I didn't see an error message this time around, so let's delete these two data columns and try that loading again. All right, so insert SE from file. We should have two data columns come in from 16 and 17. That looks much better here. So we have those two columns. Disease is filled in. The core information we wanted to bring with. There we go. And so now we can see we chose that action codes field, and the column reference, it updated itself. So ARM makes sure, since we brought both of those columns together, even though when we chose the value, it was the tab of column 3. Since we had brought in that source data column, ARM can make sure that it's smart and references the two within its own SE. All right, glad that worked out. So that's kind of the most basic use of SEs, and really I would consider, if you've never used them before, you can stop the recording now if you're watching the recording, or you can tune me out the rest of the way here. That's just fine. At least that gives you enough to kind of have a working knowledge and use of SEs. But there are some more tools that can be useful for fleshing out and utilizing SEs even more. And so I kind of try to make a big line in the sand here, though, just so people know, we're covering even more things next, but that doesn't mean that you have to do all of this in order to start with SEs. And that's actually another one of my tips that we'll see in this presentation a little later too, is start small. Don't feel that all of these examples I'm showing doesn't mean you need to run with all of them the first time around. Start with something simple, even if you just create a couple of them, because I'm always doing, there's 3 different types of ratings that I always do. Maybe I'll just focus on those the first time, and just do the right click to load them in each time. That's a great way to start. And then just know that there's these other tools here will show that you can always expand once you get more comfortable with the SEs. So the other tool here related to SEs, and maybe you've noticed this section before but didn't quite know what it did in your site description, or if you're in a protocol, it's also a section in the protocol description called SE definitions. And yeah, I must have been playing around with an SE here, but really this is a repeating section that kind of lists out the different SEs that you have used in this study. Like I said, it looks like those first empty columns I had must have loaded in an SE as I was preparing for this today. But you can see the 2 that we have loaded just a moment ago. And so you have the SE name and you have the SE description, just a real short visualization, if you will, of kind of what was contained in the SE. So this is a nice way, it kind of keeps track of the SEs that we've used. It actually also creates a menu of sorts, so you can continue to reuse them. So if I go back to the assessment data editor, and let's go to another totally empty column. Number 18 is our next one here. What you can do is in the SE name field, there's a validation list associated with it. And that validation list is actually just the SEs that you saw in the SE definitions section. So this is another quick way, instead of even doing the file browsing to pick the SE, here you actually just have the SEs that you've already used before in this study. And so there's a kind of a nice preview here. There's a little bit easier way to visualize it since it's kind of shaped the same way as the editor. There's our phytotoxicity. It doesn't always show the entire list of everything that's included, but a shorter little snapshot. And then the disease severity here, you can see that there's more than one column. And so yes, this list here, specifically referring to the SE name list in the assessment data, this is specific to this file. So the list here you see in the SE name personal list on the assessment editor, that is filled from your SE definitions. So whatever you have in the SE definitions in the study is what you see on the assessment editor. Now, when you're on the SE definitions editor, you can use this to plan out SEs that you want to use. So here what I'll do is maybe we'll create a brand new protocol. So it doesn't even have to be specific to a trial. So let's start with a totally clear brand new protocol. And you can fill in your treatments and the header and all of that. But what you can do here in a protocol or a trial, if you start with a trial where you haven't loaded an SE, the same process will apply, but we're on the SE definitions section and it's blank. So if you go to the SE name list in the SE definitions section, this becomes a list of the SEs that you have loaded across all of your different studies. So the main difference here, we are on the SE definition section. We're kind of essentially planning out the menu of SEs to use for this study. And so on the definition section, we have the list of all of the SEs that I've used. As opposed to a minute ago, we were on the assessment data editor and we were choosing from that SE name list, and that came from the SE definitions. So hopefully that helps with those two. So these are all of the SEs that I've used before, not specific to this protocol that we just created. And so this can be a nice way to bring that in as well, or not having to browse that out. So if I choose that phyto, that puts it in the SE definition section, but it doesn't actually load. It doesn't actually use that SE yet. So in the assessment editor, we don't have anything loaded yet, but we can load it pretty quickly if we use this SE name field. So here on the assessment editor now, we have that in our list, and it's very easy then to load in. So this is a repeating section that's filled in automatically. I'll just insert another empty one. So if you're not seeing your item in the list, if you just exported an SE, it doesn't automatically get filled in here. So what you can do is on this section, you can also on the right click, insert an SE from file. So then that'll give you that same file open dialog. So we can choose, here I'll grab one I've created before. This looks like an incidence and habit calculation, something like that. And so this loads it to the SE definition section, but as we saw before, that doesn't mean it does anything with the actual columns. But now we're creating that menu essentially of SEs that the trialist can choose from to load. So that's thinking specifically of the workflow of a sponsor to the trialist. It can be a really great communication tool that the sponsor can load in the SEs that they want the trialist to use. That doesn't mean they have to plan out this whole editor. They can leave it blank if they want, and the trialist then can go and use the SE name list in the data editor to see the list of approved SEs that the sponsor wants them to use. And they can then, see the preview and know exactly what they're getting into and load those from there. And just a technical aspect of that workflow to point out, those SEs are attached to the study. So that way, those files lived on my computer. If I'm the sponsor and were to send this trial out to one of you, of course, you don't have the files on my computer. So we want to make sure to include those SE files when I send this to you. And just a little plug here, the send to function in ARM, there's an option to include attachments, and then ARM will automatically bring those SEs with, so you don't have to remember that step. All right, so one more little trick here on the SE definitions editor. So we showed you're kind of planing out your list of SEs that you've created and how you can add in the ones. Sorry, there's a question here, so I just want to make sure not to move on too fast. Oh yeah, great. So you create all of your SEs in the protocol, and then that way, yeah, all of the trials will have those headers. So yeah, it's really kind of two ways to do that. You can create the menu in your SE definitions, and then they can load them however they would want. But yeah, doing it in the protocol ensures all of the trialists have that. All of those trials then have that same list. And yeah, whether you choose to leave the assessment editor blank, and then they can just pick from the SEs, or if you want to load your SE so they can see that on the editor, both of them will work. But yeah, that's a great point to hammer home. Do this in the protocol so that way all of the trials have this information accessible, and so then everyone is doing things consistently. Great point there. All right, last trick up my sleeve here on the SE definition section is we have this personal list of SEs you've been using. There is actually also a master list. So if I display master, one of the global sponsors shared their list with us, and were gracious to let us make that available to everyone. And so here we have a library of SEs. They cover a lot of different areas. I don't think they cover everyone though. So don't be shocked if you can't find something that maybe you're doing. Of course, it's with the one company, maybe the specific type of research they typically had done. You'll see the different commonalities, but there might be some items that aren't here. But it's a very big list. So what I would recommend is using filters to find what you're looking for. So really the SE description is probably your best bet. So whether you click here in this filter box, or I usually do a right click and say filter for. Now we'll filter down this list if you're looking for severity. How should I describe a severity? Sorry, my dual monitors here, it always pops halfway in between. So now we have a much smaller list of SEs that have the term severity in them. And so now we can kind of read to see what type of severity we're looking at, if it's STEM or Canopy, and then you can utilize the preview here to see kind of what they might be doing. So that can be really great if you're a little hesitant to start creating your own SE. You're not real sure about maybe what you have been selecting before. Feel free to dig into this master list and get some ideas. You can use the SE here. So maybe if we really like this, upper canopy pest severity, you can add that to your personal list. So that way now when you're in your small personal list here, let me remove my filter. It's easy to load that one in. Feel free to use it in your study. Or if you want, if you like what they did, but maybe need to tweak it, you can always do that as well. So I would probably just load it in and then do whatever tweaks I would need to do. Maybe that's pretty good, but I choose something slightly different. Maybe it's not the part rated, but maybe I'm doing subsamples. Maybe I split my canopy into 4 sections and want to change number of subsamples. Then you can just make whatever change you want and then export that SE. And you can use that column and grab the information. So then I say, yep, I want this and my new subsamples, and you can give that a name. So feel free to repurpose those that way as well. There's nothing proprietary in there that you have to leave it as is. It's just a great launching point. It's a great just kind of library for people to use for either for inspiration or to use specifically. But just one more time, just to show where that's at. SE definitions, both in a trial and a protocol. Just look at the SE name list, and there is a master list behind that that has all of that information. All right, so my last slide here is kind of the pragmatic tips and tricks. I think I mentioned at least half of these already, but to kind of recap here, as a starting point, you really don't, you wouldn't necessarily just start from an empty slate and say, all right, I want to create an SE. So, what should I do? It might be helpful to instead look at last year's trial and say, okay, this is what we did. Which pieces of these do I want to replicate? Which of these do I do a lot, or that I always struggle with how to fill it in? I want to make sure I fill it in consistently. It can be much easier instead of starting with a blank slate, hard to get going on what direction to take. Open up last year's trial and kind of peruse that and decide where you want to go. The nice thing is that's kind of how you create an SE anyway, is using that filled in header, and you can choose which pieces to bring with. So that's a great way to start. Also, that master list is helpful, and it looks like Monty has a nice suggestion there. If we look at that list again, and ZUSX, is that probably in the SE name maybe? Let me just do a quick filter and see the, there we go. So there's a quick way to filter to look at to the ones he's recommending here. That might be pretty helpful, but that's just kind of helpful way to just look through that master list again, to use it as a launching point. It doesn't have to be something you have to use the whole contents, but get an idea for it. The other thing, which I should almost have as a tagline for all of our webinars, I think, is to start simple. I like to show all or most of the functionality of a tool to show what's possible, but I think in a practical standpoint, if you've never used that feature before, it is very unlikely you would use everything that I show today. The first time out, try really simple, 1-column SE, and start small. Maybe you only make 3 of them. Maybe you make a half dozen, or maybe you make 20 SEs. The number as well, how many you create isn't too important, but just start simple, and then next year, after you've created a couple of them and you used them all year, in the back of your head, you can start to think of, boy, it'd be nice if I also created this one. Maybe even have a little sticky note that you make a list of SEs it'd be nice to have for next year. And just each year you can kind of build that library, tweak the ones that, well, it was really too bad I didn't include the disease information, or I really should have included the crop, because it feels like I'm taking tons of time finding my crop each time when I only need these 3. So I'll duplicate my severities for each crop, and I'll create, like I said, here in South Dakota, I would have a severity for soybeans and a severity for corn, and hey, I'm done. If you have a small list, don't feel like you have to have a finished product, a suite of SEs by the time the next research season starts and you're all done. It can really be iterative. Um, this is one kind of for groups. If you have a group of users that they use ARM, in the same company, it can be useful to kind of work together to create these FCs. I was going to say sit together, but that might not be allowed at this point in time. But to have a group session on Zoom or something to talk through this process of creating SEs. If you have several different people that are your protocol writers in a company, for example, having everyone, collectively sit together and talk about how you create an SE can be really healthy for you as a group, even just outside of the ARM world, just that process of talking through, what should we choose? Oh yeah, well, if we do it this way, then the trialist typically likes to send it back this way instead, or whatever. You can get kind of a collective experience and really can help create the SEs better. The SEs themselves might be better, but you guys might also just be on the same page better as well. So that can be helpful. I didn't show it much today, kind of forgot to add that study rule, but by default, the study rules get included in the SEs. So a lot of that last webinar we ran talking about study rules and how helpful they can be. Any of the rules that you might want specific for the assessment data. So like, I need to require that they fill in the rating date. So as soon as they put in data, I need the rating date included. That will come with in an SE. So now if I were to export this column real quickly here, you'll see here if there are study rules present, then there is a list it will show you. Since you chose columns that have rules applied, these will come within the SE. And because I'm doing this in the protocol, I'm the owner of all of those rules, and I'm going to be the owner of this SE. So I do have the option to drop off the rule if I didn't want them. But in a lot of cases, that option might not be there if you aren't the protocol owner. But those will be included there. So that can be a really great way to level up both sides of the fence there. Requiring rating date, growth stages, things like that can be really helpful. Just to include the SE. So every time they use that SE, those rules will get added and make sure that they fill them in. All right, so there's one more column here. I get into the end here of our time, creating a calculated multi-column SE in the protocol. And there's kind of one issue with that that kind of can be a little bit frustrating. In the protocol, we have the transform dialog locked. And I think we've kind of debated whether we need to turn that back on. One side of the fence is you're in a protocol, so you don't have data, so how can you create a transformation? But on the other side, like you're saying here, I want to, I know I'm going to want to do a calculation once I get data in, so why can't I do that here? So at the moment, you really can't, include a calculated column from scratch in a protocol. There's really that hiccup. If you know the action code, so something like the Abbott's here or the incidents, if you know that one, you can get to the action codes list here, and so you could do something like that. So if I do TAB, for example, it'll ask me what column I want to calculate from. I don't know why I started in column number 1, but I'll just do this in reverse. That will come with. So that would be the one part that you could create a calculated SE from a protocol, but it's a lot harder. In general, I would recommend just maybe opening up an old trial where you've used that calculation and create the SE. And then when you load that SE, as we saw here, when you load that SE in a protocol, now you do have that transformation. So that can be kind of a workaround for that whole I can't get a transformation in a protocol thing. SEs can kind of be a workaround for that. All right, well, I talked a whole lot today. Didn't leave us a whole lot of time here for questions. I can stick around, but I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So feel free, if you do have more questions, to throw them there in the chat. I'll hang around for a couple more minutes, but don't want to leave those of you who might have another meeting, don't want to leave you guys held captive. So thank you all for joining. And like I said, if you have a minute, have a question, I'll hang on the line here for a couple more minutes. But I thank everyone for joining. This kind of wraps up our year-end review session, but definitely look forward for more webinars in the future too.